Hello, my name is Nolan Rawson.
And my name is Tommy Ming, and today we're going to be presenting on the topic of Baker v. Carr.
For the background of this case, we take it back to 1959, where an individual named Charles Baker was frustrated due to his county's low government representation in places and cities such as Memphis, Nashville, and Knoxville. They occupied 63% of the total population of Tennessee. However, those cities only represented 13 of the 33 seats that Tennessee had in federal legislature. This means that the people who were living in the districts that were urban districts, they had much less representation in the government as those who lived in rural districts. Therefore, the Tennessee residents believed that the redistricting in the state didn't take into account the population shifts because the last time there had been a redrawing in the districts was 58 years in the past. Since Tennessee hadn't redrawn their districts in so long, the districts no longer represented the population in the districts. Therefore, one person's vote wasn't necessarily equal to another person's vote somewhere else in the state.
Okay, first question. What was the main issue that led to this case starting?
Since the district boundaries had not been redrawn in over 50 years, Baker made the argument that Tennessee failed to redraw their boundaries based on the census results, and they used the census in order to have the correct population represented in the equal amounts in their districts. And since they hadn't done that in 50 years, Baker made the argument that the votes of urban Tennesseans did not count as much as rural Tennesseans. This means that the people in the urban cities did not receive equal protection of their voting power under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment.
Joe Carr, as a member of the District of Court of Tennessee, essentially said in his argument, the U.S. District Court of Tennessee dismissed the lawsuit, saying it couldn't do anything because it was essentially a political question, and the Supreme Court rarely do any political question cases. Therefore, it was not an issue that should be brought to the Supreme Court. For the second question, now, why was it said that the Supreme Court cannot rule on this case?
Leads us to the Supreme Court ruling for this case. Chief Justice Earl Warren, along with his other Supreme Court justices, voted 6-2 in favor of Baker. Now, the reason this is not 9 total votes is because Supreme Court Justice Whittaker suffered an extreme nervous breakdown during this case, which led to him enrolling in a mental hospital and then resigning after this case. So even though there was only 8 justices, the Supreme Court decided that redistricting claims are non-political questions and are therefore justiciable in federal court. Now, justiciable basically just means that the court is able to rule on one of these decisions, and in this ruling, they decided that citizens did not have equal voting representation in these counties, and therefore violating the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Their voting rights were still allowed. They were allowed to vote. However, they were not equal, therefore violating this Equal Protection Clause.
For the third question, what allowed this case to become justiciable, and what does that mean? Now for significance. It essentially established the power of the courts to rule on the constitutionality of policies and laws for equal right of all citizens, essentially meaning that every citizen has approximately equal representation in federal Congress, same as everyone else. So you don't have the issue of a populated area versus a rural area. It also created the basis for the one person, one vote doctrine, which led to states having to redraw boundaries to represent all their citizens equally under the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. And lastly, it also led to an increase in the amount of gerrymandering in the modern day. For the last question, what was the outcome of the case? And how does it apply to future Supreme Court cases?